Hey, what it do, YouTube? It's your boy Q, and it's about that time we get down and do what it do. After a long off season in VCT, we finally have our kickoff events kicking off across our regions over here, kind of across the next week or so. So I figured, you know what, we might as well go ahead and start doing some pick'ems. I wanted to go ahead and start off with VCT Americas, talk about, kind of how things are going to break down. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get on right down to it. In case y'all haven't kind of seen how things are broken down, our teams are broken down into 3 separate groups that we're going to be kind of going over here. I'm going to have to kind of figure a way to scroll that up just a little bit more since we're zoomed in once we get down to Group C to show that. But we're going to kind of walk through each matchup, kind of talk about, why it's going to be breaking down the way that it is, and basically get down to just who qualifies for the next round. I'm not going to be able to do that as far as the full breakdown of pick'ems. We're going to actually do a video for that later on in the week once we kind of know who our 6 teams that are, or I guess it's technically our 4 teams that are maybe moving forward. So that does mean that I'm not going to be doing a pick'ems for the play-in of the second place teams. Essentially, the way the format works, the teams who qualify in the top spot, in that first place spot, right? Those teams automatically get into the playoffs. They're in that final 4, the top 4. All the teams that qualify in the second place spot, they play in a round robin. The best team of the 3 then slides into basically that 4th spot for the final 4. All right, so we won't be able to do pick'ems as far as for the play-in, so those to get into the basically top 4, but we'll then do a pick'ems of the top 4 itself once we have those teams. All right, but as far as starting in Group A, I feel like Group A is one of those where I think because NRG is so much stronger than Furia, that's a pretty easy decision. Although I do think Furia, as we talked about in our tier list video last week, I think Furia has made some strides. I think they're going to be looking good during the season. I just don't think that with the roster changes that NRG made, I don't think that they're going to be able to meet that firepower. And really the same can be said for MiBr, right? Even though I don't think MiBr is going to be as bad as they were last season, I just don't think that they're up to the caliber of Cloud9 and NRG Esports. And really, I think these are the 2 teams that qualify. Whoever doesn't win this matchup probably goes in on the lower side. I venture to guess that NRG's just going to be a little bit better. I think Furia is going to beat MiBr, which does mean that we'll get to see Furia versus Cloud9. So at least we get no repeat matchups, but I do think Cloud9 does also win that matchup there. So Cloud9, NRG, both advancing as far as from the top bracket. I feel like the bracket for Group A is the one that, again, I feels most clear, and the most of the reason that I say that is because if Cloud9 beats NRG here, right, and gets the first place position, then NRG just switches spots with Cloud9. I don't think that there is any matchup, even if MiBr for some reason beats Furia, I don't think there's any matchup that either of these teams coming in from the elimination game into the decider game that could change how I feel about that. You know what I mean? So I do think it's NRG. I do think it's Cloud9 as far as for Group A. When we look at Group B, this is going to be where things get really, really fun, because I know a lot of people are on the Sentinels Copium or the Hopium. They always seem to build up some sort of hype train around their name, regardless of whether they deserve it or not. I do think the Sentinel squad looks good this year. I do also expect the Loud squad to see some sort of drawback from last season. However, with that being said, I do still think with Sadek leading the way, you still have all your other pieces, right? I also think you picked up a good piece. So I do think Loud beats Sentinels. I think it's going to be a South American winners bracket here when you talk about Leviatan over 100 Thieves. If you guys tuned in as far as for the tier list, y'all know how I feel about Leviatan. I think that their ceiling is very, very high. The question is, with this being in the preseason here, right, is have they had the time to be able to put together what's needed this early? I think for 100 Thieves, yes. I think the question then becomes, does Leviatan, with all of their changes, even if they haven't reached their peak yet, because I don't think that they will have this early, are they better than Loud without Aspas, right? I venture to say yes, but I'm very high on the Loud train. Or sorry, I'm very high on the Leviatan train. I think Leviatan just might run through VCT Americas, personally. I think they've made the changes as well as like the retaining of the parts of their roster that make sense. I know there were the rumors as far as the little bit of feelings, you know, with the later roster change, right after EG finally decided to let their players out of contract jail. But it's business. I think Leviatan are going to end up being on the right track. I think they win here. I think similar to the way as far as with Group A, where I think the winner's bracket is still the two teams that will be advancing. I think this elimination game is going to be good between Sentinels and 100 Thieves. I think we'll get to see just how much Hopium a lot of NA is on, right? Because I do think 100 Thieves is the better team. I think they win that. I don't think it's a runaway, though. If it is a runaway, man, it's going to be a long, long season for Sentinels. I feel like Group B is the one that, of the four teams, there's the least amount of gap. So I would say expectations for like MiBr and Group A like aren't that high, right? Whereas I feel like at least expectations for pretty well everyone in this four, I think, is to at least be contending for a LAN at some point. Obviously, for a Loud, you're expecting to make every LAN. I would say even for a team like Leviatan with the roster changes that you made, you would expect to make a majority of the LANs, if not every LAN. But I think for 100 Thieves, Sentinels, I think both of their teams, you know, have the potential to build towards there. Again, I think 100 Thieves beat Sentinels. They're definitely not in a space right now where I think they beat Loud, especially with Loud wanting to make sure. I think the players that are left behind are going to want to make sure that they're proving a point, which is why I would not be surprised to see them beat Leviatan here. Again, this pick here, as far as Leviatan, that's just more about how I feel about Leviatan versus any doubts that I have about Loud personally. You know what I mean? I do think that both of our winners brackets, whether it's, you know, here in Group B or even up in Group A, when we go back and look back at NRG and Cloud9, I think both of those could be like barn burner of matchups that give us like a heads up of what that fight at the top could potentially look like. Because we kind of talked about it in the tier list, right? Like, I think other than when you look at a Loud, and even I don't even know if Loud's really ahead of everyone else. I think everyone sees NRG as the team that's above everyone else right now in Americas. And I think when you look at the Loud, the Leviatans, I think some people who are, you know, even really, you know, really on the copium, the hopium for Sentinels would say that they're up in that upper tier for Americas. I think they're kind of more mid-pack, which is fine. I think mid-pack in Americas is still very, very good, obviously. Same thing for 100 Thieves. I don't think that they're far away from being contending for a LAN. I just don't expect them to make one, personally. Right? So I think Leviatan, I think Loud, which then brings us to Group C, which is interesting because I feel like a lot of people would have expected in Group C, if EG returns with more of their roster, EG runs away with Group C the way that they kind of should, right? Like, that's kind of your reward for winning the prior season, right? I saw an interview with Potter earlier. Not earlier, but I guess that was a day or two ago. That, you know, obviously it sounds like they have good vibes about the team. Obviously, I don't think any coach is going to go out and be like, oh yeah, we kind of got ourselves dog shit players or whatever, right? But I mean, they do have good talent coming in. They've also obviously still got Jogmo there, who's, you know, been a staple, so has that experience. I think when we look at the actual bracket itself, G2, I'm still a relatively big G2 believer. I think if G2 gets hot enough against KRU, I think G2 starting this thing off against a team like KRU is actually huge for them, because in the sense that they can build themselves up a little bit of momentum. I think KRU's going to be in a better spot than they were last year, but I do think that G2 outmans them as far as like firepower. I think they've had enough time to gel together as well. So what I think is if you see G2 come out and like sweep the opening, don't be surprised to then see them beat Evil Geniuses, which then in turn, don't be surprised to see Evil Geniuses get upset by KRU as well. I don't think that happens, but I do think that there is a place. I do think that there is a world where it does. I think I'm more of a believer of, they fall, get the experience from Jogamo, Coach Potter, right? Kind of bring the team together and go, hey, look, we had an opportunity to come in through the upper bracket, which means that we would have only then needed to win one additional game, and we are already good for first Masters for Madrid, right? So let's at least make sure we regain it KRU, and then let's run it through the little decider phase for all the number twos, right? And I do think that they are able to pull that together and win. I think this is how it looks. But again, don't be surprised that in some world, G2, because of the momentum that they pick up on KRU, absolutely come in and decimate EG. And then they have a hard time rebounding and KRU walks away. And all of a sudden, go on a run! And maybe that gives KRU, the momentum that they maybe even need to at least look decent and look motivating going into the season. I don't think they would go on a run in any stretch of the means to then play themselves in from the twos, right? But I think that is a situation where we could be seeing the dismantling of EG very early on in the season. I think the way that Evil Geniuses responds to G2, because I do think G2 beats Evil Geniuses, personally. Argue with your mama, argue in the comments, feel free to do that. Actually, you know what? Do argue now in the comments if you feel different, because those comments, as well as those likes, those help me out, especially if you made it this far in the video. I really appreciate y'all vibing. But I do think G2 comes in, they beat down EG. I think that they have the experience that they'll still be able to bounce back against KRU. But I can see the world where I can see the world where Evil Geniuses, this new roster, breaks down, doesn't make Madrid, and it's kind of the signs of the season to come. Evil Geniuses, kind of falls apart. Becomes a story within itself, even though they're already a big story. So only time will tell. I think we're going to try and watch some of these matchups during the week. We'll definitely be, as far as watching, I feel like the winners I feel like all the winners matches I would really like to watch, because I think it's going to go at least to those rounds, like me being 100%, you know what I mean? So I think it's going to be NRG, Cloud9, Loud, Leviatan, G2, Evil Geniuses. I think in all those games, I think they should be really good games. So we'll probably at least try and pop watch parties for those. I might try and pop live for the Leviatan 100 Thieves game as well. I kind of got to see what my casting schedule looks like for SSA, for RLCS, because that's going to be what's most important, obviously. Want to make sure that on top of our game for that for our first one back for the new season, which is kind of big for the broadcast team as well. So we're all kind of making sure we're coming in guns blazing. But let me know what you guys think as far as our pick'ems here. I will do a drop 'em as far as the pick'ems once we have our top 4. So feel free to keep an eye out for that. Also, if you're like me and you're an esports fiend, man, I'm going to be dropping some more pick'ems for each region individually here within the coming days. Also, we cover a lot of different esports over here, man, from ALGS to RLCS to some VCT. So if it's your first time through, you enjoyed the buy, we're chasing down that first 500 subscribers, man. So do me a favor, make sure you subscribe down below. You turn those notifications on until we catch y'all back over here for the next one, man. Don't forget, with everything crazy going on in the world today, be true, be you, be sincere, game hard and love hard. All right, y'all. It's your boy Q, signing out.